All right, let's talk about one of the most prestigious, most iconic, and yeah, most abused championships in the history of wrestling, the NWA Worlds Heavyweight Championship. You probably know it by its other name, the 10 pounds of gold.
But let me just start with a question for you. What if the Stanley Cup was just chucked off a bridge? Or imagine the winner of the Super Bowl grabbing the Lombardi Trophy and declaring it worthless on national television. Sounds insane, right? Well, that's pretty much what happened to this title. And to understand how we got to that point, we've got to go all the way back to the beginning.
You see, to really get what the NWA accomplished, you have to understand what the wrestling world was like before it existed. And honestly, it was a total mess. Just chaos, with no single recognized champion. Yeah, before 1948, pro wrestling was basically the Wild West. Every little local promotion had its own world champion, which you can imagine totally devalued the whole idea. A fan in Texas thought one guy was the champ, while a fan up in Iowa was cheering for someone completely different. There was no undisputed king of the mountain.
Well, that all changed when a group of promoters, guys like the legendary Sam Muchnick and Pinky George, they all got together. They decided to create a governing body and an alliance to bring some order to all that chaos. And their mission, it was simple, but it was absolutely revolutionary. Recognize one and only one true world heavyweight champion.
And they didn't waste any time. The NWA was formed and Orville Brown was crowned the very first champion. But it was really the second champion, the legendary Lou Thesz, who cemented the title's prestige for good. Starting in 1949, Thesz went on this historic tear, traveling all over the country and unifying all those other so-called world titles into one single undisputed championship. With that solid foundation in place, man, the NWA entered its golden age. They put a simple but absolutely brilliant system into place, a system that would make their champion the biggest star in the entire industry.
And this was the genius of the whole territory system. The NWA champion, he was this special attraction, like a traveling king. He'd come into a local territory, he'd face their hometown hero in front of a sold-out arena, and then he'd move on to the next town. It made the local guy look like $1 million just for being in the ring with him, and it made the champion look absolutely unbeatable. It was basically a license to print money.
And the key to building up all that credibility was stability. Lou Thesz held that unified NWA championship for an incredible 2,300 consecutive days. Let that sink in. That is over 6 years. This wasn't some hot potato title that changed hands every few months. If you held this belt, it meant you were, without a doubt, the best in the world.
And just look at the lineage it created. I mean, the list of men who held this championship is a who's who of wrestling royalty. You've got the rugged toughness of Harley Race and the Funk Brothers, the blue-collar charisma of Dusty Rhodes, and, of course, the styling, profiling Ric Flair. Every single one of them added their own legendary chapter to its story.
Then, in 1973, the championship got the look that we all know and love, this beautiful domed globe belt. It was so distinctive, so prestigious, that it earned a nickname that's just as famous as the title itself, the 10 pounds of gold.
But, just like with all great empires, the cracks eventually started to show. And the very system that made the NWA this absolute titan was about to become its greatest weakness.
The whole world was changing. The NWA was like a gentleman's agreement between all these regional promoters. But in the 1980s, Vince McMahon's WWF, well, he wasn't interested in gentlemen's agreements. He wanted a national empire, and he used cable television to beam his superstars into every single home in America, basically erasing the old territory lines for good.
Now, this decline didn't happen overnight. It actually started way back in the 60s, when some major territories broke away. But the 80s, that was the kill shot. By 1993, when WCW, which was the last major TV presence for the NWA, formally pulled out, the alliance was just a shell of what it once was. The king was left without a kingdom.
But here's the crazy thing. Even as the NWA itself was fading away, that 10 pounds of gold still had this immense symbolic power. Ric Flair's famous line, it captured it perfectly. Holding that belt was proof that you were great. Which makes what happened next just all the more shocking.
So the breaking point finally came in August of 1994. The NWA sanctioned this tournament to crown a new champion, and it was held in a gritty little promotion called Eastern Championship Wrestling. The winner, a guy named Shane Douglas, he gets in the ring, he grabs the microphone, and then he throws the legendary NWA Worlds Heavyweight Championship on the ground. He calls it a relic and declares the birth of a new title, the ECW World Title. In one single act of defiance, the most storied championship in the history of wrestling was publicly declared dead and just thrown away. It was the ultimate act of disrespect, a clear signal that a new, more extreme era had just arrived. For years after that, the title just kind of languished in obscurity. But you know what they say, you can't keep a good legend down. A whole new chapter was about to be written, and it was driven by a very, very unlikely person. So in 2017, an unlikely savior pops up out of nowhere. The frontman for the Smashing Pumpkins, Billy Corgan, he purchased the entire National Wrestling Alliance. The name, the history, the championships, all of it. And he had a vision to restore the glory of the 10 pounds of gold.
And honestly, his strategy was brilliant. Instead of trying to go head-to-head with these billion-dollar companies, he focused on the one thing they didn't have: history. A YouTube series perfectly named 10 Pounds of Gold started telling the story of the belt. A new, credible champion in Nick Aldis traveled the globe, just like those champions of old. And then, it landed in the main event of a show that would change wrestling forever.
At All In, which was the biggest independent wrestling show of all time, Cody Rhodes, the son of the NWA legend Dusty Rhodes, he challenged Nick Aldis. And he won. And in that moment, with tears in his eyes, holding the exact same title his father famously held, Cody brought the 10 pounds of gold back to a massive international stage. It was just a perfect full-circle moment.
Which kind of brings us to today. The NWA is alive and well, but it's operating in a landscape that's just dominated by giants. Its greatest asset is its history, right? The story that's literally etched into the plates of that famous belt. So the question remains, in a world of high-def spectacle and fast-moving trends, is there still a place for the 10 pounds of gold? Can a legacy that was built over 70 years really compete? I guess that's a story that's still being written.